All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Again, thank you for joining. A lot of updates, both with A2Ls and IRA and efficiency standards. And of course, the election is going to have some effect on government affairs. And we want to at least give you our take on what we think what that may mean. So, and how we might need to prepare, or at least start thinking about it. So with that, we'll dive in. The agenda for today. First, we'll just go through the election and what the experts I talked to are saying that probably will mean. Talk about the Inflation Reduction Act and what's changed with that and what we can expect to change. Changes approved to CEE. That is what we use to measure our tax credits and whether or not a consumer can take advantage of those tax credits. And they have been updated for January 1st. So we do want to walk through that and explain what happened. And then finally, there are some continuing things unfolding with A2Ls. We're learning more all the time, and it's a changing landscape. So as much as we would love it to be just smooth and flip a switch and it's done, it's not that easy. So we want to make sure you know everything we know, and we're going into this with eyes wide open. So. Um, I didn't have it on the agenda, but I just want to remind everybody, utility rates, rebates are still out there, not going away, still going to be a factor. And if you're not taking advantage, please talk to your TMs because it's too important of a piece of the puzzle to not take advantage of. And we're still seeing that a majority of contractors are not. So give yourself an advantage. We are absolutely there to help. We've got websites to do the claiming for you to make it easier, and we can get you up and running. So not a whole lot more on that right now, but one thing we did learn from a couple of utilities is that their funding is busting the bank. They've got more money because the install rates have been below expected. So either the rebates will last longer or they'll jack them up and give more money because once they get the bucket of money, they don't like to give it back. So we expect the rebates to be strong for a while terms of the election, some of the things that we have heard from some of our experts is EPA and DOE. Generally, when there's a new president elected from a new party, you expect political changes, and that's a normal thing in Washington, and people base their career on that and go in and out of roles based on which party is governing. This time, we really expect some much deeper cuts, and the Trump administration has said that they'll be cutting into non-political roles as well, which will have a good and bad effect. There's obviously some people in those non-political roles who have been there a long time and have got stuck in their ways and um, aren't willing to change, and that can be bad. Uh, the downside is that they have a lot of legacy knowledge. They know how processes work and what happens and how to get things done. So when you bring new people in, generally they're focused in single areas and they're really good at those areas, and those areas may have nothing to do with HVAC. So we may lose some legacy knowledge and we may get some policies and programs that look like they're made by people who don't understand our business. And you may be laughing to yourself right now, thinking that that's all we get these days is policies that um, people don't really uh, um, people who are made by people who don't really understand our business, and that certainly could be argued, but it's likely to get worse if this happens. So just be on the lookout for it, and we'll certainly be talking about it here, and every change that happens, we'll be bringing it out. So all good there. Um, Second thing, the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act. As much as the Republicans did not like this program, none voted for it. It is now established and it's in place. And so to repeal it would require um, the Republicans to take jobs and money out of their states. And that generally doesn't happen. So we don't expect a lot of states who have been approved or in the process of being approved for that to be repealed because it's really tough for the politicians to deal with money leaving a state. So we expect some of it to say, but there will be some clawback. The states who haven't been approved yet, that certainly is a reality. And of course, some states have like South Dakota, have denied that they want anything to do with it. So they have officially said they don't want those dollars. So, but for our states that we're working with here in this part of the country, I expect that still to go through. So we'll talk more about that in a minute. A2Ls, that ship too has sailed a little bit too far to be repealed. The manufacturers are all ready for it, and for anything to be repealed there would be a real detriment to our business. So don't expect to see a lot of changes there. The next phase of refrigerant change, however, certainly has a lot of potential to change. So I think that's something we need to watch closely. We were expecting a phase change in 2029, and that certainly is a reality we could see happening. So um, we'll look at that very closely. And finally, and probably the most concerning piece of this is what the states do. There are some renegade states out there that had been controlled by some compromises in the AIM Act and a few other things that got us to where we are. Those states would have gone down their own path with their own efficiency standards had we not found that compromise. And what that means if that continues to happen, and some of the states in the Northeast, and of course, California and Washington and Oregon are in that camp as well. If those states go down their own path and have their own efficiency standards, then manufacturers get into a real tough spot. They have to start making multiple pieces of equipment for multiple states. And that is the frightening part, because that means everybody's equipment gets more expensive. So the folks who are dealing with that from the manufacturers are trying to find ways to keep everybody on the same page and keep us building similar products for the entire US, because that allows us to keep lower prices and keep everybody in the same boat. So we'll be watching that closely and chatting about it here. If you take a look at the issues that we're dealing with from a regulatory requirements, what we know for certain, certainly low GWP, we've been talking about that. They're coming. R32 and R454B are on their way. We're working through all the details there. We'll talk more about that today. Inflation Reduction Act, the HERE and the Homes Acts, we'll talk about those. Those are still going and gaining some traction. DOE commercial efficiency beginning 2029, January in 2029 is still in place, and we don't expect much change there. So we've gone through a couple of changes with commercial efficiency, and that is always challenging, but with the long lead times should be manageable. A more concerning one for us in our part of the world is furnace regulations. The 95% efficiency minimum standard goes into effect December 18th, 2028. There's a lawsuit out there from AGA and APGA saying that that is going to be unnecessarily burdensome to low income. And that may have some traction and it may move the date, but as of right now, it is law, and we will not be able to get those furnaces below 95% efficient. So something we'll keep an eye on and be talking about in this meeting. PFAS, or the forever chemicals, doesn't really affect this part of the world, but we want to keep an eye on it because it may become a more important part of what's happening, and it is included in some of the refrigerants we use today. Single plastic bans is something that this part of the country isn't talking much about, but we'll keep our eye on it. And then Energy Star most efficient status, we'll talk about that later today and what the changes are there. I'm not going to go through the still pending, but as you can see, there's a lot there. The good news is a lot of it doesn't apply to our part of the world, but stuff we're watching and keeping track of very closely. So with all that, we'll dive into the Inflation Reduction Act. I've got a couple people to admit here into the group. All right. So Inflation Reduction Act. The programs we are really watching closely in that particular program is the high efficiency electric home rebate program. That's the HERA program. The 25C tax credits, we've talked a lot about that one, and then the homes rebate program, the HERE program. And the HERE of the two, the high efficiency electric home and the homes rebate is really the one that matters to us mostly. That one is focused on initial install rates, whereas the high efficiency electric home program requires a lot of paperwork, audits, energy performance standards, and we don't expect it to be a major part of what happens with the IRA bill. So if you want to look at the IRA program funding by state, you can go out to the website, and there's a map that will tell you state by state. I just updated it today, and Iowa preparing applications for next steps. So it still is, as of today, not any further along in the process, but it is still preparing. If you go to the Iowa site, it will tell you that they're expecting to have the program available in the next few months. Judging from how other states have had it work, I would expect 4 to 5 months before it's actually available to Iowa. If you look at Illinois, they've applied for 263 million and the government's awarded them 5 million. Normally what happens is that's funding, the 5 million is to pay the administrative process to get the program up and running. So that's what they've approved. There's no reason to expect they won't have everything approved. Most other states have gone through a similar cycle, but it's certainly not approved yet, and we have no idea how they're going to be rolling it out. Wisconsin, on the other hand, is approved, and they were approved for $149 million to go to this program. And if you click through the Find My Rebates and look at Focus on Energy, partnering Wisconsin Utilities, which is where the details are, you find this, and it says coming soon. And I looked as far as I could and couldn't find a good way to get information. But I did want to share with you the eligibility by household, and it's customers with a total household annual income less than 150% of the area median income. What's that math mean? That means in Grant County, which is the furthest southwest county in Wisconsin, which is one Republic serves, the average median income, according to HUD, is 88,312. So that's the average household income for that county. And if you do the 150% math, that means any household that has a household income annually of 132,468, they'd be eligible for the $8,000 rebate on a heat pump. And people who are between 80% and 150% get a 50-50 deal. So they get 8,000 on a $16,000 job. If you're below that 80% of AMI, you get 100%. So if you bought an $8,000 heat pump system that's eligible, you would get $8,000 back. So it'd be 100% paid for. So, however, still coming soon. And if you dig into the contractor side of it, and that's really the next slide I have, is you have the ability to sign up here. And not being a contractor, I couldn't dig a whole lot deeper than that to see what's included in signing up, but you do have the ability. So I would expect Illinois and Iowa to have similar look and feel to what Wisconsin's done, but we'll see that roll out over time and start to get a feel for how that really looks. So again, stay tuned, keep coming to our sessions here, and we'll keep you updated on what happens. The CEE is the Consortium for Energy Efficiency, and the Consortium for Energy Efficiency sets the standards by which the 25C tax credits are given. And the possibility of changing is something I published last time we did that. Well, it's happened. And what they have done is they've tried to eliminate the north and south options. So we had different standards for north and south, and they've eliminated that. And they tried to eliminate the ducted versus ductless. That creates two paths, and it's a little bit confusing, but I want to share what they have done. This is this was what's in place until the end of the year, and should look familiar. 15.2 SEER and HSPFs of 8.1 on heat pumps, and then the capacity ratios of 58% at 17 and 47. And then you have the advanced tier 2. So those what we've been giving you matches on to get you that 25C tax credit standard. What they've done is they've eliminated those two paths, so you no longer have the non-ducted and ducted, and that makes the big difference for us because we really don't care about the north and the south aspect of it because we've only been sharing with you the north. But when you really look at the key differences, it's um, the fact that not only did they change them, but they said they're going to be changing them again in 2026. So if you look over here, the blue is what 2025. The green is what will change in 2026. So, and we'll walk through those here a little bit. So the next thing is the dual path. So we eliminate the ducted, non-ducted. You just have two standards that can get you there. Capacity ratios have changed and HRI. So if you look at the EER, what we had before was for non-ducted, we had 10, or for ducted, we had 10 EER, and for non-ducted, we had 9. So ductless units is 9 EER2. Both of them now are 9.8 or 11, depending on the capacity ratio. So you can choose either. One is clearly designed for ductless and one is clearly designed for um, ducted units, because the inverter causes uh, uh, different run operation that allows you to get higher EER or that straight electric usage. What are you getting out of your unit at full blast versus what you're getting and the ratio and how much heating you're getting out of the unit at lower temperatures. The more you're getting out here, more likely the EER is lower. So you have a couple options. At this stage, I wouldn't worry about it too much as contractors. We're going to give you a list of equipment both on the um, ducted and non-ducted side that meets. Regardless of the path, we'll give you a complete list as we start to move into the 454B and R32 products that we stock. We'll make sure you have that information and you're good to go. We're still 2 months away from needing this data, so the Republic refrigeration elves are working hard on putting those matches together for you. We do have a lot of products that get there, a lot of matches that can make it happen. So you will have those shortly and be able to start making good decisions on how to offer the CC or CEE 25C tax credit product. And I'm happy to answer questions. I know it's not the simplest thing, but we're trying to work through it and understand it ourselves because it's not all that new or all that old. We're still sorting through it and trying to get all the matches done. So if you have questions, let us know. We will be sending out the slide deck and the recording of this so you can take another look and dig a bit deeper if you choose to. All right, real quickly walk through the 25C. Again, I'm not a tax professional, and you should, any questions you have or your customers have should always be pushed to a tax professional. Don't put yourself in that position that you're asking questions. But I do like to remind people of the forms and the fact that, because every time I talk about this in public, I still get people confused about withholding versus tax liability. So again, this is using Iowa median income of $65,000 on the standard tax form. And this particular person at that rate has tax of $4,332. They have tax credits that our 25C program allows for them of $2,600. You subtract that out, they have a new tax liability of $1,732. That means they owe that in taxes. They had already paid $4,000 in withholding. That means they're going to get a refund of $2,268, as opposed to if they hadn't had that rebate, they would still owe $332. So those are real dollars. Homeowners get those, and we certainly want to make that available when we can. Let homeowners make a good choice. Again, we don't want to be in the position where a homeowner comes back to us later and says, why didn't you give me a chance to get that rebate? So let's make sure we're talking about it up front. So steps, offer 25C. If they don't buy it, they don't buy it, but at least you've proposed it and given that options. For now, it's 15.2 on SEER2 heat pumps, but January 1, that's going to change and we'll have new systems for you, but it'll be 16 SEER2 and the EER depends on the path of that particular product. Efficiency on furnaces is still 97. Explain to the homeowner, it will reduce your tax liability. And make sure you let them know. Only the tax professional will know for sure the tax credit is available to them, but could be up to $2,000 or $2,600 depending on what they buy. I always recommend having a card for a local tax professional. That gets you some extra points with your tax folks in town and gives the homeowner a chance to ask somebody if they've been doing it online and don't know exactly how to take advantage of the tax credit. On your invoices, make sure the 25C AFUE, SEER2, HSBF, and going forward, probably even the performance ratios of heating need to be on there. The AHRI number, though, is the most important because that's probably upon any audit from an IRS perspective. That's what they're going to be looking for to understand what that match actually gets the homeowner. If you have questions, ask your TM. You can reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help out as well. All right, A2Ls. Where are we going with A2Ls? What we've been hearing out on the street. First of all, R54B and R32 have propane as part of their blend. We've heard that starting 1/1/2025, the refrigerants have been postponed, that you don't have to use those new refrigerants. New EPA licensing is required to handle A2Ls. All my existing service tools must be replaced. I have to replace everything. Shipping of A2Ls requires a special hazmat load and has to have a hazmat driver. And I must replace all line sets for A2Ls. And finally, I can't install an A2L on an existing or older furnace. We have heard all those at different meetings. People have said that to us, and none of those are correct. So there's some partial truths in there, but the reality is most of them are just plain wrong. So we'll walk through step by step and talk through some of these and the other pieces. Want to remind everybody on the call again that ACA has a really good low price training program to get all your team the basics. Steve Goodenough also has a really good A2L basic class, and he'll be doing that going forward to get people up to speed, which is an outstanding class. He's done that webinar as well, and it's Steve always does a great job. So we're lucky to have him, and the two different options. And at this stage, as important as A2Ls are going to be to your business, not a bad idea to do both. Common terminology, whole lot of things to talk through, and I'll go through all of them. The only one I won't cover today is WTF, and I think you all know that one, and I certainly think this is as I read through some of these. But HCFCs, hydrochlorofluorocarbons, HFCs, hydrofluorocarbons, HCs, hydrocarbons, HFOs. That's what we're going to. The hydrofluoroolefins, olefins. Always have to rehearse that one and say it properly. Hydrofluoroolefin. And that is the 454B. It's basically a blend that gets us the right mix of stuff to make the refrigerant work, similar to what 410A did, but get us down to the global warming levels. So ODP was ozone depletion. That's why we got 410A to begin with and got rid of R22. GWP is global warming potential, a phrase we're going to be hearing more and more all the time. AIM Act was the American Innovation and Manufacturing Act of 2020 that kind of set in place everything we're doing right now with A2Ls. EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. CARB is the California Air Resource Board, which has been a huge piece of this huge force in making all this happen. SNAP, significant new alternative policy. And then finally, CO2 equivalent is any gas how does it match with just a standard CO2 molecule? How much different is it, and how much longer does it take to break down? Some other ones we need to worry about now, Air Conditioning, Heating, Refrigeration Institute, we've known for a long time, they do all our testing, but now we have to worry about the National Fire Protection Agency, and they do all the rating of how this stuff burns. American Society for Testing of Materials becomes important because they have the standards for how we test what burns. LFL, you're going to hear a lot more of, lower flammability limit. That is how much of any gas do you need in the space to start burning? Right? If you don't have a concentration of that LFL or more, then it's not going to burn, no matter what type of flame you put to it. Minimum ignition energy, that's how much heat you need to light it on fire if you do have enough gas in the space. And then heat of combustion. And heat of combustion means if you do get that gas burning, how hot is it? And is it hot enough to continue burning on its own and light other things, or is the heat so low it's not going to burn much else? Those are important factors we look at with the new refrigerants, and they're pretty important when you look at how they compare to some of the other very flammable gases out there. Just a reminder, Montreal Protocol way back when got us out of the CFCs and HCFCs. That's when we were trying to reduce the ozone depletion. We had a hole in the ozone layer, and we've done a pretty good job. The ozone layer doesn't seem to have near the problem it used to, but now we've created the global warming potential, and there's a whole lot of reasons for it. You can't point just at the HVAC industry and say this is our problem. However, we do have a big part of the fix. We moved to 410A, which had a much higher global warming potential than did R22. So shame on us, but little did we know that that was where we were headed. But that's why we're going to 454B and R32. As you can see, they have much lower global warming potential numbers of 466 and 675. So that's where we're headed, and that's all driven by the Kigali Amendment, if you hear that phrase. So the AIM Act was what really drove this for us, and there were three parts of it. And I've talked through this a couple of times, but we have a slight update on the last one. The virgin bulk phase down was how much new 410A or excuse me, yeah, 410A are we going to be making? And essentially, we went through a big reduction of new 410A being made at the beginning of this year. And so we're down to about 60% of what we had been making back in 2020. So we've reduced that manufacturing quite a bit, and we'll continue to reduce it down to 15%. As of right now, there's no plan to go below that level. So we'll be watching that. Technology transition takes place January 1st, meaning all manufacturers have to make equipment that uses global warming potential below 700. So we've been talking about that for a while. That transition's in place and will continue. And then finally, refrigerant management. What does that mean? Well, basically, it's all final now. And when we started the whole process, there was going to be requirements to barcode every tank, and you and us, meaning distributors and contractors, would be responsible to keeping track of those barcodes and making sure the government knew where every tank was at all times. Hardy challenged that and said, no, we don't think that's fair. EPA can't regulate containers. That's not what they do. They're responsible for the energy, and so we were able to eliminate that. But we have allowed disposable cylinders. That's going to continue. The first fill equivalent reclaimed refrigerant mandate. What basically that meant is manufacturers, as they made new equipment, would need to use reclaimed refrigerant. There's some litigation going on there, and right now that's as of 29. So we keep you posted on that. And then automatic leak detection right now on the commercial and residential systems with greater than 15 pounds have to have leak detection and transportation, but leak detection and repair is required certainly on systems, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. Just a reminder, we have an A2L. That means it's lower toxicity, but slightly flammable, right? If you're wondering about the chemical compounds, it's 69% R32 and 31% R1234YF, which is also the chemical used in most auto refrigerant, so air conditioning in cars. So a new mix. What we got rid of was the R125, and the R125 was the flame suppressant that kept it as an A1, so we didn't have to worry about flammability. But as you can see, it also added the GWP, so that's what made it very bad for the atmosphere. The other form I like is to look at atmospheric lifetime of the different refrigerants. So how long do they stay in the atmosphere in years. So R125, what we put into the R32 to make 410A is 29 years. So if one of those molecules gets into the atmosphere, it sticks around for 29 years. So not good for global warming. Um, if we look at 410A, it was a 30-year number. We look at R32, it's 5 years. So 32 is not too bad all by itself. 454B, we think it's going to be slightly less than 5, but we don't have anything published yet. If you look at R1234YF, the auto, it's actually 5/100ths of a year. So really 7 or 8 days when you really look at the numbers. So that refrigerant works really well. In terms of GWP, but unfortunately, it doesn't work really, really well for heating and cooling homes. It can be a component, but it certainly isn't going to work to do the entire system with the technology we have today. So that's how we ended up where we are. All right, moving right along. Um, Again, looking at Class A, Class A2L, and then Class 3, it's really about how flammable this stuff is. And the 2Ls are just barely more flammable than the Class 1. So Class 1 is shown in that first picture, and you fill up the beaker with gas, and then you hit your electrode and measure how big that flame gets. And as you can see, the 2Ls just go slightly beyond the Class 1s. And I am never going to say that A2Ls aren't flammable, because they are. But are they as flammable as propane? Not even close. But that doesn't change the fact that we have to be careful, and we have to follow the guidelines and do everything that the manufacturers are saying, because none of us can afford lawsuits when a house is burned down, and God forbid anybody's lost their life. So we don't want to live with that. So we want to follow the rules and make sure we're doing things right. And one of the big rules is refrigerant sensors. We're going to have to get used to it. We're going to have to start working with it. The other thing that's very important is following the building codes. And I've dug deep into the Iowa building codes, and uh, they're pretty vague. And the concern I have with that is that means inspectors are going to have some flexibility. So if I were you, I would reach out to your local inspector and try to understand how they're going to enforce it, because there's a lot of latitude right now, because the governments didn't know how to write the building codes effectively, because it's such a new thing, and Iowa's code doesn't spell it out very clearly. So it's worth some time to talk to your inspector and find out what they're going to be looking for and what they're going to work on most closely. Biggest consideration from my perspective is the risk of fire. And we've always had the risk of suffocation, but it hadn't been a big issue for us in the way we do single family homes. When you got into VRF, it absolutely was, because you could dump a whole lot of refrigerant into a single space. But in traditional ducted systems, it's not been a major factor. But going forward, that fire risk is there, and you really need to think about concentration. So if we're looking at this little 1,000 square foot home, it becomes a factor of if you're moving the air around in that, and that's about dispersion. So how much gas is concentrated in one space? If you're running circulation, then you're moving that air all around and you can use the entire space. If you're not, then that can all settle in one room. So imagine if all that refrigerant gets dumped into this one bedroom. Now we get a lower flammability issue, that we have enough concentration to cause a spark. So if little Sally has a candle lit on our bed before she goes to bed, and that refrigerant starts to fill up in that room and isn't circulated, we've got a real problem. For two reasons. One, it can push all the oxygen up in the room and cause her to be suffocated. And if it reaches that flame, it could ignite and get some other flames going. So it really comes down to the flammability. If you have circulation happening, or you have a refrigerant detection system, we can use the entire square footage to determine how much refrigerant can be in that system. If we don't, then we have to take the smallest room by square footage. So the room I just showed you was approximately 100 square foot. This whole building is approximately 900. So when you look at the refrigerant limits based on that, 125 square foot is 4.3 pounds. So if we're looking at a 2-ton unit, we're already well over 4.3 pounds. So we got a problem. That's why we need a refrigerant detection system. If we're looking at 800 square foot, we can use 27 pounds. And if you find a structure that people live in that requires 27 pounds of refrigerant of the square footage, um, I'd like to see it, because that's a heck of a lot of refrigerant. So refrigerant detection systems are going to be a must. We're going to have them. And at this stage, for the little cost of adding one, it's a pretty smart thing to do. And that's why the manufacturers have added them almost all systems. If you look at ASHRAE 15.2, the refrigerant detection system basically requires these things. The system must be tested in installation. When the refrigerant is detected, it must energize the indoor blower to get circulation. It must activate required mechanical ventilation for sufficient runtime, open zoning dampers, and de-energize electric duct heaters. Uh, the one that doesn't happen automatically is ventilation, and that's the one that concerns me about inspectors. I don't know how serious they're going to be about ventilation, because in reality, you do the math and look at everything. The circulation does the job. It gets you out of that lower flammability limit. But 15.2 says ventilation. And if the inspector decides that's what he's going to pick on, then we need to figure out a relay that turns on a ventilator. The good news is it's only asking for 5 minutes of ventilation in ASHRAE 15.2, but it is there, and we don't want to ignore that. So a piece to consider, and again, a reason why I think talking to your local inspector is wise at this stage. The refrigerant detection system itself, couple important notes here. One, it's going to have a control box that has a board that basically does the sensing and then tells the furnace to turn on the blower and shut down the heating system. That's what's happening in the system. What is really important is these are very placement sensitive. You can't just randomly put them anywhere and think they're going to do the job. The manufacturer instructions, and certainly everything you get from Steve Goodenough and JCI, is going to show you exactly where they go, and you need to honor that. And Steve will get into more details on how that works, but we don't want to take risks. Again, the last thing any of us want is to be sitting in court defending a fire that happened and have to talk through this stuff and not having done what's required. As far as adding coils to an existing furnace, so you add a new coil, new outdoor, and it's A2L, existing furnace. Certainly can be done. There are kits to make that happen. One of the things to consider is that testing element. Make sure that everything's in the right place and you've got it all set up properly, but it does need to be tested. So working that into your plan on how you're testing for proper operation and making sure that you're following all the guidelines to make sure that's done well, and you can note it so it's in your record. So if the fire marshal comes and says, hey, I'd like to see the testing you did, you've got it in your files. So not fun stuff. I get it. Nobody wants to do this, but this is where we are, and it's not going away. So ACA came up with a pretty good checklist. Does the system have a leak detection system or refrigerant detection system? Yes or no? Will the fan continuously run or just when there's a call for heat or cool? Again, that gets you your mixing of the air throughout the entire building. Is the system ducted or ductless? That's going to make a difference too, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Does the outdoor have one or multiple units? Again, outdoor system have one or multiple indoor? Again, can all the refrigerant from that outdoor unit go into one indoor unit? Changes your look. Does the system have automatic shutoff valves? So if there is a refrigeration detected, can it shut off the valves immediately? And finally, is continuous ventilation an option in this job? So those are things to think about, things your techs or your salesperson can be looking at to make sure you know what you're stepping into. The reason multi-head mini splits are a concern is if you have a 2.5-ton multi-head system and all that refrigerant can be pumped into one space, then we have to consider a different technique for managing the refrigerant detection. So more to come on that. We don't have all the details yet, but certainly something you want to be thinking about. Do want to publicize JCI's refrigerant detection calculator. It's the first in the industry. You put in the data on the building you're working on, and it's going to tell you if you require the RDS or not. Um, we have for Apple Android, you can pull down the DS Solutions app, and please do. This is a good tool to have and start learning and start looking for all the information that's needed. So you have good documentation and good printouts to share with anybody who might be asking after the fact. Good set of data to add to your proposals, which if your competition decides not to put in a RDS, and they should, this gives you some pretty good ammunition and very professional documented information. All right, preparation for installs. The ACCA, A2L online training are certainly Steve's as well. Updating your tools that need to be updated. Training on your brand's RDLs, LDS, refrigerant detection system, leak detection system. They're going to be different. So if you're installing something other than what you've had training with Steve on, make sure you're looking into the differences because there are some. Incorporate processes like the checklist, the RDS testing, whether it's a completely new system or not. It's a good idea to test and keep records. Ventilation. What is the requirement going to be in your area? I would recommend assigning somebody in your company to look closely at 15.2 and make sure you're matching the needs. And then finally, learn and use the DS Solutions app for the RDS calculation tool. All those are going to be good things to do to get prepared for your installs. Another preparation step to think about, certainly A2L cost. It's going to be more expensive, and I can't imagine that it's not going to be more expensive to install. There's just more to consider, more things to do, more tools. So there's going to be some added labor cost to this as well. Now is a really good time to start thinking about how you're going to communicate that. What story are you going to tell to homeowners so they understand why the price is going up? Because it's going to be upon us very shortly. So it's a good time to be thinking about that. Talk about it with your TM, maybe role play it, talk through it, see how things sound. And we don't want to scare people, but we want to educate them. Service vehicles, really materials of trade for the residential piece. It's not changing anything, nothing really required, no placards required. It's a service vehicle, no ventilation required unless you're packing a whole bunch of stuff in there, which most service vans don't. And the A2L tanks will be able to be stored horizontally as long as you have the valve upward, because we don't want them. The difference is rather than a pressure relief valve, they have a valve that actually just burps the excess to get you back within the pressure limitation. And if it's turned downward, it's going to burp liquid, which is not good for anybody to have that refrigerant in liquid form laying on the bottom of the truck. So just need to mount them upward. So a real quick note on the PFAS chemicals. These are the chlorofluoralkyls. These are the ones that are man-made and stay in the environment for a very long time, some of them for hundreds of years. They are in HFCs like 454B, so some states are starting to poke at that. The states we live in and sell in don't. They're not talking about them too much. The good news is the 454B PFAS chemicals are much shorter lifespan. So they're 10 and 15 years as opposed to hundreds. So they're not getting as much attention, but it's good to know what they are because if a consumer asks, you want to be intelligent about answering the question and explain that, yeah, there are some PFAS chemicals in the refrigerant, but in a perfect world, they never leave the system. And secondly, if they do, they're not like some of the other PFAS chemicals that are hundreds of years. It's only a 10 to 15 year PFAS. One final piece on the transition. When we talk about components, there's a lot of question about components and replacing just the outdoor unit if it fails, and you can do that. The DOE, though, has said that it needs to match a standard as if it has an old coil that may not have been maintained terribly well. So it's going to be a pretty high efficient unit, and it's going to be a kind of a wash whether you install a new entire system or just that replacement component. So we don't see the 410A components being a big factor. We will have some solutions for you, but I would not count on that being something homeowners are going to want, because your warranty goes out the window as well. So it becomes like replacing a compressor. You get a 1-year warranty as opposed to a full 10-year warranty on that piece of equipment. So it's probably not going to be used very often, but we'll have more information as we move forward. All right. As always, there you got additional resources. Your TM can get you stuff. There's good brochures to hand to homeowners, and to help your team learn more, there's some good videos. If you go online to either the York or Luxair sites, they're continually adding new information to explain how all this works. So feel free to reach out there and continue to educate yourself. Again, Steve is going to be doing more training all the time, and we want to get you into those classes. And any questions you have or anything you'd like us to dive into deeper in these calls, just let us know. We want to be here to support you and make sure we're getting you the right information. So with that, I'll answer any questions anybody might have. I don't see anything in the chat at this point. But anybody who wants to unmute themselves can, and I'll be happy to answer a question.
Hey, Andy, this is Rick.
Hey, Rick.
Hey, I kind of remember something in the meeting we were at in Houston last week that JCI mentioned that the delay on the furnace, like if you have an existing 5-year-old furnace, 10-year-old furnace with A2L, you cannot have a furnace delay. You have to make sure that there is no furnace delay. Do you recall that?
Time delay relay, are you talking about?
Yes.
Yes, I do, and I don't think they're for sure on that yet. They're checking with the government, as I recall, to find out how they're going to enforce that. So as we learn more, we'll add that to the mix. So that was kind of a let's see what happens kind of a message. So the risk is that your time delay relay on the blower allows time for that refrigerant that's been cooling to get to a hot heat exchanger and cause ignition, right? So if you have a 2-minute time delay before you turn on the heat and there's been a leak in your coil, that's definitely a problem. But if everything's going properly, your fan turns on as soon as you sense that refrigerant. So hopefully the testing will clear out and we know exactly how to manage that. But right now, I think everybody's still scratching their head and saying, is that going to be a factor? And if so, how do we fix it? So great question, Rick. Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you all for joining. We'll be doing this again December 11th next month. So should have a lot more information. We will be recently back from the distributor national convention, and there's always good information there. So stay tuned. A lot more changing, and we'll keep watching closely. Thanks, everybody. Have a great Wednesday.